thank you for participating in your breakouts. And we're going to go each breakout just to give a high level of what you discussed, and particularly what some of the recommendations are. Our mayor, Justin Bibb, has joined us. Let's give our mayor a round of applause. As well as our chief of police, Drummond, Chief Drummond. Okay, Kone, can we start here with your team? Yeah, and actually maybe at a high level around the recommendations. And if there are any other highlights that you want to share. Okay.
All right. Well, I think we had a pretty good conversation upstairs, and it started with increased positive police interactions. All right. A lot of people felt that there was not enough positive police interactions with the youth and people in the community. That was probably one of the biggest things. And then they went on to ride by. I asked the question, if an officer rode by and waved, said hello, would you say hello or wave back? It was a little touchy at first, but then some people said they would. So that's like a barrier breaker. And then it was said that maybe this officer stopped and played ball with the kids in the community. And then came school perception on interactions. I'm in the school district, and a lot of things that are said when you say East Cleveland is always negative. All right, and that's just a perception, and that's not always true. And they combine the city and the school district, which we are totally separate. And then positive interactions at games and crowds. And then it was also said charity events, notable charity events, like giving car seats to people or helping out with some kind of, like they brought up smoke detectors like the fire department do and CO detectors. And then, I'm not gonna say who said this one, but instead of the officers talking to people as opposed to talking at people, there's a big difference. And then finally, increased presence in the neighborhoods in need. It was said that when police are needed in a particular neighborhood for a shooting or whatever, they don't come to the next day or when it's daylight. And that's a problem. So that's what we had so far.
Okay, let's give a round of applause, please. We'll go over here, and do you have somebody who's going to represent you? All right, so we have a law enforcement officer and a citizen in the community rep. Okay, love that.
I can't even see that far.
Well, you can take it too.
Oh, come on now. My name is Andre, and I work for Fairfax Recreation Center, and I'm a coach. Y'all need y'all kids taught something, send them to Fairfax. All right, the first thing we had was, what was the first question? Police. The main focus was empathy.
About the discussion, how did they feel about the pan?
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, how we felt about it was, I think each person up there made great points, especially when they brought up the truth. It was hard we feel like the police don't tell us the truth all the time. They tell us what they want us to hear, and they don't always be the truth. So I think that if they give us the truth, the community will open up a little better and start talking to the police, being friends with them, so we won't have as much violence out here that we have in the streets. The next question.
You can go ahead.
The next question is yours. It's, was there help about the law enforcement in your community? Lieutenant will finish up.
law enforcement in my community. I'm from East 30th and Central. That's the neighborhood I grew up in. And coming from that neighborhood, the law enforcement was really bad. And, you know, being seen as a person, they don't see each and every person as an individual. They look at us and first thing they think is they're a gang member. All of us, just because of our skin color, we are not gang members. We are not. And the parents want to make sure their youth are safe. Whew. When I lived in that neighborhood, I didn't always feel safe. There was a couple of times, you know, a guy walked up to me and put a gun to my head. Told me, you know what I'm here for, give me what you got. And my kids like, wow, Dad, I come home and tell them like, wow, Dad, what you do? What am I supposed to do? I gave them what I had. And that's like the young man said, like, when you call the police, it might take them a day to get there because they feel it's not a top priority. If somebody call you, unless they say somebody selling some drugs, then they're gonna get there real quick. You know, I want to give this bear, this police chief, a chance because I know everybody is not the same, but the communities are really bad, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. We'll finish it up with Lieutenant Orlando.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's disheartening to hear the community's perspective on law enforcement. I actually approached this young man after the conversation and provided him with my card because we have to be intentional about our relationships with the community. That's one of the things I spoke to on the last question. We have to do more than check a box. We go to the trainings, we go to the diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings, we go to the procedural justice trainings, we go to all of these trainings, and we check the box to say we did it. But what happens when you leave that training? What happens at the application process? And that's where we have to get to. We have to do more than check the box. We have to be intentional about our relationships with the community. We have to be intentional about meeting the community in the community when they're not in crisis. If that means spending more time at the school, talking to the basketball team, talking to the softball team, so that they become familiar with you. When there's familiarity, there's trust in that process. You heard Chief McCauley say, trust is lost in droplets, it's gained in droplets, but it's lost in buckets. We have to win that trust back incident by incident, drop by drop. And we have to be intentional about doing it.
Thank you. Just 2 or 3. Okay, we have one other group and then we'll finish up here, okay? If you can just say your name, please, and where you're from.
Okay. My name is Amaya Dennis, and I'm from East Cleveland. So our main takeaways from the presentation were that building trust is important, engaging with the community is important, also diversity is important. Some things that we saw in our community were that the police don't always respond when you call them, or you can't always see them around. And some things that we would like to see more are interactions with the community, like council meetings, just community meetings in general, programs, giving back. They should also have bonds with the people in the community and see them for themselves, and that'll help build lovingness in the community.
Thank you.
Transit police. Also, what was talked about is that the kids wanted to see more of officers that look like them, people that live in their communities that are also police officers. The point that I talked to about them is that they can make that change because they also can apply to be police officer in their communities. That's part of doing their part in making that change happen. Biggest concern that I got from it was that they feel that they're not being represented and that they don't see police at all. With our department, we're trying to make sure we engage with everyone in our stations, on our bus lines. Our officers speak and try to engage with everybody on the line, not just when there's an incident, just because they're passing through. Something that we expect and we think that every officer would do the same.
Thank you. Okay. And maybe a couple of points that haven't been mentioned yet, please.
Okay. My name is Patricia Bell, and I'm a social worker with the City of Cleveland. I'm speaking on behalf of the youth that were in our group. And one of the things, in addition to some of the other things that you all have heard, was that the officers, so there's conversation about how can they become a part of the change that they want to see in their community. And that is by becoming police officers. Well, we know that all of our youth are not interested to become police officers. And so what other opportunities are there? But more specifically, as it relates to the recruitment that takes place in our communities, an example would be the police officers come out to the recreation centers. And one of the youth specifically stated that they come and they bring flyers and they lay them on the table, but there's no interaction at all with our young people. There's no explanation. There's no encouraging words. There's no how they can make a difference. And then if you think beyond that, if they were to become encouraged by becoming police officers in our community, then you have to look at the larger scope of things, which means that when they are looking on the media constantly and seeing where police officers are still committing police brutality, as well as even when cases arise, they're being acquitted and it seems like nothing happens. So it becomes a cycle. Now they're discouraged again. What can be done about that?
Thank you. Okay. And we have one last group. State your name, please, and where you're from.
Hi, I'm that's low. Hi, I'm Diani. Thank you. In our group, we talked about how the system is built off of oppression, and for the oppression, like starting way back from like before any of us were actually born, the like police like force was actually built like Jim Crow, the segregation, the like slavery, back in slavery. And sorry, the like police, like there's racism in the police districts, and we didn't really touch bases on like the community wise. We talked more about how like the actual rooting of it and like the actual problems. There's problems with the racism and the division, and we were like, could you bring that closer? We came to like that we need to all be more togetherness, and that like for us to actually see the changes, we need to like see that there's a division and that they're separated. There needs to be more de-escalation training and like with the guns and like learning how to control like situations and handle it. There's the community accountability. There's like people in the community needing to like take responsibility for their actions. The education of all sides, like the education of the Black history, the education of the police, the education of everything, the shared expectations. Like if I expect you to treat me with respect, you should treat me with the same amount of respect I'm treating you with. Like it should be equal on all sides. It shouldn't like, and I don't know.
This baby knew the history of law enforcement. She gave us a little education on how law enforcement got changed, and I applaud her because she was on mark. For us to understand, if we're going to be in law enforcement, we need to understand the history, how law enforcement was started. And my name is Sheila Mason. I'm the chief of police out of Woodmere. One of the things that we came up with is we always use the word change. And one of the lieutenants said, deputy chief, said, we need to stop using change as a buzzword and make change and make it work. Show what change actually is. And I think that's one thing that law enforcement, we as a group, we would say, oh yes, we're going to make changes, but we never show the community exactly what we're going to do. Our community should mirror what police department should mirror what our department's communities are. That is one of the major problems with law enforcement. We do not mirror our community. We should have empathy, as the coach said. Our departments should show empathy. Empathy should start at the top and work its way down. And that's been one of the problems, because if you don't allow the officers to know that we're here to assist you, when you go out into the community, they're going to take those same problems to the community. And so as a law enforcement department, I'm from a smaller department, so I can work with my officers. But I know coming from a larger department, it's going to be kind of hard. But it takes the community and law enforcement to come together so that we as a group can make law enforcement a profession that is great. I love law enforcement, and it is a program that we need. And if we don't come together as a community and make it work, we're doomed to fail. And so when they say making change, all of that come together. Change and empathy has to work together for law enforcement.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief. Yeah. So before we start the conversation with our mayor and Chief Drummond, I just want to thank everybody in this room for participating in this conversation. There will be actually, we're going to submit all of your ideas so that Chief Drummond has them, and we will continue the conversation. One of the things that I felt was important to do, and I've had a chance to get to know our mayor, and it was during, Mr. Mayor, one of your debates. And the question that the moderator asked you was about law enforcement. And you passionately spoke to a vision that you had. You passionately spoke to some change in which you wanted to bring forward. Can you just share kind of with our group here your thoughts about, one, what you just saw, and also what your vision for law enforcement in Cleveland is?
Absolutely. I first want to just thank the CL3 Alliance for bringing this conversation together, and thank our students and law enforcement for having the courage and the humility to have this very candid but important, tough conversation about a critical topic, not just in Cleveland, but the nation. And Kevin, I think my vision for policing and public safety is really rooted in my experience as a Black boy who grew up in the Southeast Side on one of the toughest blocks in the city on Dove, whose dad was not just a police officer for over 30 plus years, but also a fireman for over 30 plus years. I know my dad, Donald, served with many of the members of law enforcement that are in this room this afternoon. And my pops was a high school dropout from East Tech. He was a part of the Huff riots in the mid-1960s in Cleveland. He went off to Vietnam, was a diver in the Navy, came back and went to Tri-C and got his start at the police academy. And he wanted to be a cop because he believed that that was one of the best ways he could give back and serve the community. And so my vision is rooted in, number one, this is really about justice and equity. The young woman talked about how policing is rooted in slavery. Policing is codified in the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, where police systems were created to track down Black people during the slave trade. And I'm willing to bet you a large majority of members of law enforcement don't know that history. So without that context, how do you expect us to dismantle a system that is built on oppressing people of color? And one of the things that I believe in the power of local government to dismantle these systems. That's why I supported issue 24, which is now called Section 115 of the City Charter, which is going to create one of the toughest independent civilian review oversight boards in the nation right here in Cleveland, because we need to have more voices like yours around the table to make sure we have the right training and right protocols in place to hold our officers accountable. I would also say this, I know I'm going a little long, but this conversation in America right now about whether you are pro-police or anti-police is a false choice. right? And it's leading to a very dangerous conversation in the nation right now. As a son of a cop, I believe we can have thoughtful, good law enforcement so that when you call 911, they show up on time, but also they got to respect your constitutional rights as tax-paying citizens of this country. I believe that's my mandate as mayor, and Chief Drummond and I are working on that every single day as we lead our city.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Drummond, let's give him some love, please. Chief Drummond, you've had an opportunity to be in the audience as part of the CL3 Conversations for Change. And I would just like for you to react to, one, your experience in doing that, but also based on what did you heard? And I heard you kind of have some verbal reactions up here as well. So what were your thoughts?
First of all, also thanks the Cavaliers, the Indians, and the Browns for of course, dedicating themselves and being involved in this. That's very important that we have all the teams involved in this activity that we're doing here. And of course, I've been involved in it, like you said, Kevin, over the years as an audience member and so forth, just kind of listening and absorbing and taking information in from our youth. And it's vitally important that we hear from the youth. For me, to hear what you have to say, extremely important, is critical. And here's why it's important, and here's why it's critical. We have to hear from the youth what's going on, because we need to police the youth in a way that's respectful, and not just the youth, but everyone in our communities and so forth. It's disheartening to hear some of the things that I hear. The mayor made a very good point. It's a false choice between. It's a false choice. Police have a very difficult job. It's a very challenging job. There's no question about it. But the expectation from the mayor, expectation from myself, and all the law enforcement officers in here is that we do it constitutionally. That's the most important thing, that we respect you, respect your family members, and we do our jobs in a constitutional fashion. That's my expectation for the officers and so forth. We've had numerous amount of training, cultural training, awareness training, de-escalation training. But what does it mean if we're not putting it into practice, as was stated a little bit earlier? What does it all mean? It means absolutely nothing. We have to hold our officers accountable for their actions to ensure that they are policing constitutionally. They're treating people with dignity and respect. And then if they're not, then we hold them accountable. And that's what I believe we're doing in the Cleveland Division of Police. I can tell you, I've been on the job about 33 years. That's a long time. It's longer than probably most people in here have been alive. 33 years I've been a police officer. When I came on back in 1989, I try not to go long, Kevin. When I came here and came on in 1989, this police department was completely different. You wouldn't recognize the police department. And I see Deidre shaking her head back there. She's been around a long time. Dion, also the chief of Cleveland Clinic and the chief of RTA. They've been around a long time. And some of the things that the officers did back then, today, with our expectations, would probably get them indicted and put in jail. But it was accepted in the community. It was accepted as part of the culture and so forth. None of that is accepted today. And I can tell you that this is a totally different police department. And I'm not resting on our laurels or anything like that. I'm not making excuses whatsoever. It's a totally different police department. We've changed. We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go as well. Our training has helped us and will continue to help us. Holding folks accountable is important. And change, and especially cultural change, starts at the top. It starts at the top. It starts with me. It starts with the deputy chiefs, the captains, the lieutenants, all the way down in the expectations that we have for our people. And again, if they're not doing what they're supposed to do based on our training, based on inclusion and awareness, then we hold them accountable. But it's important to understand, we can't always have a heavy stick either. We can't always have a heavy stick. When people are doing the right thing, our citizens, our police officers, when they're doing the right thing, I think it's important that we support them when they're doing the right thing. We ask a lot of them. I ask a lot of them And the mayor asks a lot of them and so forth. So when they're doing the right thing, based on constitutional policing, based on their training, based on the policies and so forth, I say let's support them. And when they're not doing the right thing based on all the training, based on our policies, both based on the expectations from our citizens, then we'll hold them accountable. And we're going to do that. We'll continue to do that.
Thank you. I have one more question for each of you. And Mayor Bibb, you're a big sports fan, and you started off your conversation by thanking the CL3. And, you know, we have Coach Bickerstaff here. We have President Chris Antonetti over here with the Guardians. What is your expectation of your 3 professional sports teams in playing a role to help solve some of the things that you heard, but to support your vision?
Yeah, that's an important question, Kevin. You know, earlier today, I had a really awesome conversation with former NBA All-Star Baron Davis, and I asked him about the role that athletes and sports organizations can play in driving activism and driving social justice. And the thing that was very clear from Baron, and I think other athletes would agree with this, is they have to use their voice. They have to use their voice. It's great to celebrate our athletes when they win an NBA championship or a World Series or a Super Bowl. But what I saw in this nation and for other athletes in Cleveland after we lost our brother Tamir Rice, they started to wake up and say, this could be my son or my daughter. This could be me. And in this era of post-George Floyd policing, I believe we all recognize that government can't do it alone. Law enforcement can't do it alone. And it's the activists, whether you're an athlete like a LeBron James or a Baron Davis, or if you're a quiet community organizer, you have to continue to stir the consciousness of our communities to drive that change. And I think our sports organizations should empower their athletes to do that more in our communities.
Okay, thank you. And Chief Drummond, one question for you, and Mr. Mayor, may I ask you to just wrap it up with some closing thoughts. Part of, I guess, for me, a thrill is to be able to engage with so many youth, and, you know, you've been there and you've had the conversations. And I had a disheartening conversation with a couple young men as they, during this session, where they were like, why should I participate? I can't make a difference. Nothing's going to happen. 15 and 16 years old, no hope. And it broke my heart because I'm like, yes, you can make a difference. What is your message to our youth who are out here around what can they do?
Kevin, a great question. It's very disheartening to hear that as well. What I can tell the youth, and especially youth I'm looking in the audience at right now, is I'm you. Mm-hmm. I'm you. I sat in the same chairs you sat in. Same school system, Cleveland Public School System, John Hay High School I graduated from. I am you. And I probably thought a lot like you as well. You know, what can I do? What difference can I make in my community and so forth? You can make a lot of difference. Look at me. Look at Dion. Like I said, I keep pointing to him and so forth, and Deidre and so forth. They are you. You can make a difference. You can go to school, which you are in school, graduate from college, which I did. I had an opportunity to go to college because I was a decent athlete and so forth, and a football scholarship. Graduated from the University of Toledo, came on a police department with a degree and so forth, and now I'm going through the chain, a sergeant, a lieutenant, a commander, a deputy chief, a chief, and now I'm in a position where I can effectuate change, and that's what I'm doing. So that's how that 15-year-old and that 6-year-old can do it. They can become part of the solution, and they too can sit in these chairs just like Mayor Bibb there and make a difference, and then with that platform have the opportunity to effectuate change by putting individuals in places that have the same vision, same passion that you have to make a change in the community that they're serving. So that's what I would say to those two.
Okay, so thank you. So as we wrap up, I don't want you to think that the feedback was negative 100%. We had a great panel earlier, and it was brilliant minds from a couple of young adults that were just saying, look, here's what role I can play. Here's things in which I want to do in the community. So there is balance, and we know, again, we look out in the audience, there's youth, there's There's representatives from the NBA that are out here. There's a representative of all our community. So Mayor Bibb, we know it's going to take our whole community. So what are some final thoughts that you can share with all of us?
Well, I'd say this. One of the things that gives me hope, and I know it's hard sometimes to find hope, particularly given the jobs that Chief Drummond and I have, every day we are faced with a whole host of challenges that you wouldn't believe that we have to make decisions about. And the thing that gives me hope is you have a 34-year-old Black mayor working with a chief of police that's Black who's dedicated over 30 plus years to serve this city. We come from two different generations, but we have the same vision for what policing should look like in Cleveland. And the only way our vision can be realized if you all in this room, especially our young people, decide to take an active role in your own salvation. We can't solve it together by ourselves. We can put all the money, all the programs in place. But if you don't decide to be a part of making change, we will never change this city. And so I encourage you to do what my father Donald did. He saw the Huff riots in 1967. He said he wanted to be a part of change. He served his country in Vietnam, came back to Cleveland, and served this city and this region as a police officer and a firefighter to show his son what was possible. If Donald can do it, if Chief Wayne Drummond can do it, you can do it too. That's how we change Cleveland, and that's how we'll change America, starting right here in Cleveland, Ohio.
Mayor Bibb, Chief Drummond, on behalf of the CO3 and our facilitators who also help facilitate those conversations with the Cavaliers and the NBA All-Star Game, we thank you. And we thank all of you for participating in Conversations for Change.